Stop using Linux. Like this. SSH settings that get you hacked. First, listen, I need to talk to you about something serious. If you're running a Linux server with SSH access and you haven't changed these settings, you're basically leaving your front door wide open with a welcome mat that says, "Hack me, please." And I'm not exaggerating. Every single day, thousands of servers get compromised because of these exact mistakes. So grab a coffee, sit down, and let me show you exactly what's putting your server at risk. Let me start with a story. Back in early 2025, there was a company running their infrastructure on Ubuntu servers. Nothing fancy, just standard business operations. They thought they were safe because they had strong passwords. But here's the thing, they were using the default SSH settings. Within 3 months, they noticed unusual activity. By the time they investigated, attackers had already gained root access, installed cryptocurrency miners, and were using their servers as part of a botnet. The electricity bill alone cost them thousands. And you know what the worst part was? This entire disaster could have been prevented by changing just 5 settings in one configuration file. Now, before we dive deep, let me tell you about something that happened in February 2025. 2 critical vulnerabilities were discovered in OpenSSH itself. These weren't small issues. We're talking about flaws that could allow man-in-the-middle attacks and denial-of-service attacks. They affected OpenSSH client versions from 6.8 P1 all the way through 9.9 P1. That's almost a decade worth of versions. The Qualys Threat Research Unit discovered these vulnerabilities, and they were serious enough that OpenSSH maintainers immediately released version 9.9 P2 to fix them. The first vulnerability, tracked as CVE 2025-26-465, could let attackers intercept your SSH sessions when a specific feature called Verify Host Key DNS was enabled. The second one, CVE 2025-26-466, could crash your entire server through memory exhaustion. And here's the kicker, these vulnerabilities were introduced years ago, sitting there waiting to be exploited. But it gets worse. In April 2025, another critical flaw was discovered in Erlang's SSH implementation. This one had a perfect score, 10.0 on the CVSS scale. That's as bad as it gets. It allowed an unauthenticated remote code execution. Think about that for a second. An attacker didn't even need credentials. They could just send specially crafted messages during the handshake phase, and boom, they're executing code on your server as root. Security researchers describe this as surprisingly easy to exploit. No memory corruption needed, just a simple logic error that anyone with basic knowledge could leverage. And then there's CVE 2025-61984, discovered in October 2025. This vulnerability in OpenSSH's proxy command feature allowed remote code execution on client systems. Attackers could inject malicious commands by manipulating usernames with control characters. Proof of concept exploits were published almost immediately, showing exactly how to compromise systems using this flaw. These aren't theoretical vulnerabilities. These are active threats that hackers are exploiting right now as we speak. So what does all this mean for you? It means that even the most trusted software has vulnerabilities. And if you're not staying updated and following security best practices, you're an easy target. Let's talk about the biggest mistakes people make with SSH, starting with the most dangerous one. Mistake number 1, using the default port 22. I know what you're thinking, but that's the standard SSH port. Everyone uses it. Exactly. That's precisely the problem. Port 22 is the first thing attackers look for. There are literally millions of bots scanning the entire internet right now, trying to connect to port 22 on every single IP address they can find. These aren't sophisticated hackers. These are automated scripts running 24/7, trying common usernames and passwords on every server they discover. Let me give you some perspective. When security researchers set up honeypot servers designed to look vulnerable to study attack patterns, they see thousands of connection attempts within hours of going online. Not days, not weeks, hours. And almost all of these attempts target port 22. By keeping your SSH on the default port, you're making yourself visible to every automated attack tool out there. It's like parking your car in a high-crime neighborhood with the keys in the ignition and the windows down. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, but changing the port is just security through obscurity. And you're partially right. Changing the port alone isn't enough to secure your server. But here's the thing. Security is about layers. No single measure makes you completely safe. But every additional layer you add makes it harder for attackers to succeed. A determined hacker who specifically targets your server will find whatever port you're using. But 99% of attacks aren't targeted. They're opportunistic. These automated bots are looking for easy wins. When they hit port 22 and nothing responds, most of them move on. They don't have time to scan all 65,000 ports on every IP address. They're looking for low-hanging fruit. Changing your SSH port to something between 1024 and 65,000 significantly reduces the noise. Your server logs become cleaner. You're not wasting resources processing thousands of failed login attempts. And most importantly, you're not showing up on the radar of these automated scanning tools. Think of it as moving your valuables from the front window display to a safe in the back room. A professional thief might still find it, but casual opportunists won't even know it's there. Mistake number 2, and this one is absolutely critical. Allowing root login over SSH. This is probably the single most dangerous configuration you can have. Let me explain why. The root user is the super user account on Unix and Linux systems. When you have root access, you have complete unrestricted control over the entire system. You can read any file, modify any configuration, delete anything, install anything, and basically do whatever you want. And here's the thing, every single Linux system has a root user. It's not like regular user accounts where the username might be different. Everyone knows the username is root, so when an attacker targets your server, they already have half the puzzle solved. They know the username. They just need to guess the password. And trust me, they will try. Brute force attacks against the root account are extremely common. Attackers use tools like Hydra, Medusa, and Encrack to automatically try thousands of password combinations. They use dictionaries of common passwords, leaked password databases, and variations of common words. If your root password is something like password123 or to admin, or even p@s word1! You'll be compromised in minutes. Even if you think you have a strong root password, why take the risk? Every password can potentially be guessed given enough time and computing power. Here's what you should do instead. Create a regular user account with a unique username that attackers can't predict. Give this user pseudo privileges so they can perform administrative tasks when needed. Then completely disable root login over SSH. This way, an attacker has to guess both the username and the password. That exponentially increases the difficulty. Think about the math here. If you have a password with, let's say, 10 possible characters in each position and 8 positions, that's 10 to the power of 8 possible combinations. But if you also have to guess the username, and let's say it's 8 characters from a set of 36 possible characters, that's 36 to the power of 8 additional combinations. The attack complexity doesn't just double, it multiplies astronomically. But there's another benefit to disabling root login: accountability. When someone logs in as root, there's no way to tell who actually did it. Was it you? Was it another administrator? Was it an attacker? You can't tell from the logs. But when users log in with their own accounts and then use sudo to perform administrative tasks, every command is logged with their username attached. You can see exactly who did what and when. This is crucial for security audits, troubleshooting, and forensic analysis if something goes wrong. I've seen countless servers get compromised because root login was enabled. In one case, I investigated. The attackers got in through a brute force attack on the root account. The password was admin1234. That's it. 7 characters. They got in within 2 hours of starting their attack. Once they had root access, they installed a backdoor, created additional user accounts, modified system files, and set up persistence mechanisms so they could regain access even if the original entry point was closed. The cleanup took weeks and required completely rebuilding the server from scratch. Mistake number 3, using password authentication instead of SSH keys. Look, passwords are convenient. I get it. You type them in, you're logged in, done. But password authentication is fundamentally insecure for SSH access. Here's why. Every time you use a password, you're transmitting a piece of information that, if intercepted or guessed, gives someone access to your system. Passwords can be brute forced. They can be found in data breaches. Users often reuse them across multiple services. They write them down or store them in insecure ways. They choose weak passwords because strong ones are hard to remember. SSH keys solve all of these problems. An SSH key pair consists of a private key, which you keep secret on your client machine, and a public key which you put on the server. When you try to connect, the server challenges you to prove you have the private key without actually sending it over the network. This is done through cryptographic signatures that are virtually impossible to forge. A typical RSA key is 2048 or 4096 bits long. That's not 2000 possible combinations. That's 2 to the power of 2048. We're talking about a number so large, it has more than 600 digits. Brute forcing that is literally impossible. With current technology, even if you had all the computing power on Earth working for billions of years. But the benefits go beyond just strength. SSH keys can't be phished. You can't accidentally type them into a fake login page. They can't be captured by keyloggers. They don't appear in log files. And you can have different keys for different purposes. You can have one key for work servers, another for personal projects, and another for automated scripts. If one key is compromised, you only need to revoke that specific key, not change all your passwords everywhere. Setting up SSH key authentication is easier than you think. On your local machine, you run SSH keygen. It creates 2 files. The private key stays on your machine. Never ever share this file with anyone. The public key you copy to the server. There's even a command called SSH copy ID that does this automatically for you. Once that's done, you can configure your server to only accept key-based authentication and completely disable password authentication. This eliminates brute force attacks entirely. An attacker can try passwords all day long, and it won't matter because password authentication is turned off. Now, I know some of you are worried about losing access if you lose your private key. That's a valid concern, but here's the solution. Create multiple key pairs. Keep one on your main computer, another on a backup device, and maybe store one securely in a password manager or encrypted backup. Just make sure each private key is protected with a strong passphrase. That way, even if someone steals your key file, they can't use it without the passphrase. Mistake number 4, not using fail2ban or similar intrusion prevention tools. Even with all the security measures we've discussed, attackers will still try to get in. They'll scan for your SSH port. They'll try to log in with various credentials. They'll probe for vulnerabilities. You need a system that automatically detects and blocks these malicious attempts. That's where fail2ban comes in. Fail2ban monitors your log files for suspicious activity. When it detects multiple failed login attempts from the same IP address, it automatically creates a firewall rule to block that IP for a specified period. It's like having a bouncer at your door who throws out anyone who can't prove they belong there. The beauty of fail2ban is that it's adaptive. It doesn't just block known bad actors, it learns from behavior. If someone tries to log in 5 times with the wrong password, they get banned. Period. Here's how you configure it. After installing fail2ban, you create a jail configuration for SSH. You specify how many failed attempts are allowed within a certain time window. For example, you might allow 3 failed attempts within 10 minutes. After that, the IP gets banned for 1 hour. You can adjust these numbers based on your needs. If you're worried about locking out legitimate users, you can be more lenient. If you're running a critical server that's under constant attack, you can be more aggressive. The typical fail2ban configuration for SSH looks something like this. You enable the SSH jail, set the port to match your SSH port, whether that's the default 22 or a custom port you chose, set the log path to point to your authentication logs, define the maximum number of retry attempts, maybe 3 or 4, set the ban time, perhaps 1 hour or 3,600 seconds, and define the find time, which is the window in which those attempts must occur, maybe 10 minutes or 600 seconds. Once fail2ban is running, you can monitor it. You can see which IPs are currently banned. You can manually ban or unban addresses. You can check the status of different jails. And the best part is that it works silently in the background, protecting your server without requiring constant attention. I've seen fail2ban block thousands of attack attempts on busy servers. The logs show IP addresses from all over the world, trying common usernames, trying dictionary attacks, trying brute force combinations, and fail2ban stops them all automatically. Mistake number 5, running outdated SSH software. Remember those vulnerabilities I mentioned at the beginning? The ones from February 2025? Those only affected certain versions of OpenSSH. If you were running an older version, you weren't vulnerable to those specific issues, but you were vulnerable to other issues that had been discovered and patched years ago. And if you were running the affected versions but hadn't updated to 9.9p2, you were sitting on a time bomb waiting to explode. Software vulnerabilities are discovered constantly. That's just the nature of complex software. The important thing is that when vulnerabilities are found and patches are released, you apply those patches immediately, not next week, not when you have time. Immediately. I'm talking about same day or within hours of a critical patch being released. The problem is that many people set up their servers and then forget about them. They run for months or years without updates, and during that time, dozens of vulnerabilities might be discovered and patched, but if you're not updating, you're still vulnerable to all of them. Attackers keep databases of known vulnerabilities. They have automated tools that scan for vulnerable versions. When they find one, they exploit it. It's that simple. Keeping your SSH server updated is non-negotiable. Most modern Linux distributions make this easy. On Ubuntu or Debian, you run sudo apt update, followed by sudo apt upgrade. On Red Hat or CentOS, you use sudo yum update or sudo dnf update. These commands pull down the latest security patches and apply them. You should be doing this at least weekly, if not daily. For critical security updates, most distributions offer automatic updates that can be configured to install security patches as soon as they're available. But here's something many people miss. You should also be monitoring security advisories for the software you're running. Subscribe to the Open SSH security mailing list. Follow security researchers on social media. Set up alerts for CVE announcements related to SSH. When a critical vulnerability is announced, don't wait for your distribution to package the update. Sometimes you need to compile from source or apply patches manually to get protected quickly. And please, please, please test your backups. Before you apply major updates, make sure you have a recent backup and that you know how to restore from it. Updates can occasionally break things. If you apply an update and it causes issues, you need to be able to roll back quickly, but never use the possibility of breaking things as an excuse not to update. The risk of staying vulnerable is far greater than the risk of an update causing temporary issues. Now let me talk about some additional security measures that go beyond these 5 main mistakes. First, implement two-factor authentication for SSH. Even with key-based authentication, adding a second factor like Google Authenticator or Duo provides an extra layer of security. This means that even if someone steals your private key and cracks your passphrase, they still can't get in without the second factor. Second, use firewall rules to restrict SSH access. If you only need to access your server from specific IP addresses or networks, configure your firewall to only allow SSH connections from those addresses. This is especially useful if you are accessing your server from a static IP address at your office or through a VPN. Even if attackers find your SSH port and have valid credentials, they'll be blocked by the firewall if they're not coming from an allowed IP. Third, implement rate limiting on your SSH service. This is separate from fail2ban and works at a lower level. You can configure your SSH server to limit the number of connection attempts per time period. This slows down brute force attacks even before fail2ban kicks in. Fourth, disable empty passwords. This should be obvious, but you'd be surprised how many servers have this enabled. In your SSH configuration, make sure permit empty passwords is set to no. Otherwise, if any user account on your system has an empty password, attackers can just log in without any password at all. Fifth, use strong encryption algorithms. SSH supports multiple encryption methods, but not all of them are equally secure. Older algorithms like DES and RC4 have known vulnerabilities. Configure your SSH server to only use strong modern algorithms like AES, Cha-Cha-20, and similar. Disable weak ciphers and MACs. This prevents attackers from forcing your server to use a weak encryption method that they can break. Sixth, set up logging and monitoring. Configure your SSH server to log all authentication attempts, successful and failed. Set up alerts that notify you when suspicious activity is detected. This could be multiple failed login attempts, successful logins from unusual locations, or any administrative actions performed through SSH. The sooner you detect an attack, the sooner you can respond. Seventh, use a bastion host or jump server for critical infrastructure. Instead of exposing your production servers directly to the internet, set up a hardened bastion host that serves as a gateway. Users SSH to the bastion first, and then from there they can access internal. This creates a choke point where you can implement additional security controls and monitoring. Eighth, regularly audit your SSH configuration. Don't just set it and forget it. Periodically review your SSH config file. Check which users have access. Verify that your security settings are still appropriate. Remove accounts that are no longer needed. Rotate your SSH keys regularly. Security is an ongoing process, not a one-time setup. Let me share one more real-world example. There was a university research lab running computational servers. They had hundreds of researchers with SSH access. The servers were configured with default settings because the IT department assumed that since it was an internal network, security wasn't a priority. Someone's laptop got compromised through a phishing email. The malware on that laptop scanned the internal network, found the SSH servers on port 22, and started a brute force attack. Within a few hours, it cracked several weak passwords. The attacker installed ransomware that encrypted all the research data. Years of research work was lost. The university ended up paying a ransom, but even after paying, they couldn't recover everything, all because of basic SSH security mistakes. Here's the thing that frustrates me. SSH security isn't complicated. These aren't advanced techniques that require a PhD in cryptography. These are basic, fundamental security practices that take maybe an hour to implement properly. Change the default port. Disable root login, use SSH keys, install fail2ban, keep your software updated. That's it. 5 simple steps that could have prevented countless server compromises. But people don't do it. They think, it won't happen to me. Or they think, my server isn't important enough to target. Or they just procrastinate because it seems like extra work. And then one day, they wake up to find their server has been compromised. Their data is gone. The air server is part of a botnet. Their electricity bill has skyrocketed from cryptocurrency mining. Their reputation is destroyed, all because they couldn't be bothered to spend 1 hour on basic security. Don't be that person. If you're running a Linux server with SSH access, stop what you're doing right now and check your configuration. Open your SSH config file. It's located at ssh.config. Look at the port setting. If it says 22, change it. Look at permit root login. If it says yes, change it to no. Look at password authentication. If it says yes and you're not using SSH keys, set up keys and change it to no. Install fail2ban if you haven't already. Run a system update to make sure you have the latest security patches. And while you're at it, test your configuration. Try to log in as root. It should fail. Try to log in with a password after disabling password authentication. It should fail. Try to trigger fail2ban by making multiple failed login attempts. Make sure it's working. Don't assume everything is configured correctly. Verify it. I know this video has been long, but this stuff matters. SSH is the primary way most people access their servers remotely. If your SSH is compromised, everything is compromised. It's not paranoia to take SSH security seriously. It's common sense. The threat is real. The attacks are happening right now, and the defenses are simple and effective. So please take this seriously. Secure your SSH. Follow these best practices. Stay updated on security advisories. Monitor your logs, and sleep better knowing that your server isn't an easy target for the thousands of automated attacks happening every single day. Your future self will thank you when you're not dealing with the aftermath of a security breach. Trust me on this one. Let me give you one final piece of advice before we wrap up. Document everything. When you make these security changes, write down what you did. Keep a record of your SSH port number, your key locations, your fail2ban configuration. Store this documentation securely, but make sure you can access it when needed. I've seen administrators lock themselves out because they changed the SSH port, forgot what they changed it to, and didn't document it. Don't let that be you. Also, consider implementing a configuration management system like Ansible or Puppet. These tools let you define your SSH configuration as code. You can version control it and deploy it consistently across multiple servers. Manual configuration is error-prone. Automation ensures consistency. Security is a mindset, not a checklist. You can implement all these measures and still be vulnerable if you don't think about security in everything you do. Every time you give someone SSH access, think about whether they really need it. Security isn't something you do once and forget about. It's an ongoing process. Stay educated. The security landscape changes constantly. New vulnerabilities are discovered. Subscribe to security newsletters. Follow security researchers. The more you know about current threats, the better equipped you'll be. That's it for today. If this video helped you, share it with anyone else who runs Linux servers. We need to spread security awareness, and if you have questions or want to share your own SSH security tips, drop them in the comments. Stay safe out there, and remember, security is not optional, it's essential.